Welcome to Le Grand Voyage with Château Malartic-Lagravière. June 2016 was not the first time the streets of Bordeaux have been filled with thousands of Irish and Belgians singing, dancing and drinking wine. But for several hundred years they'd have come to make and trade wine. This time the singing was for a group match in the UEFA Euro Championships at the Stade de Bordeaux. Belgium won 3-1, and at least by one measure the Belgians have won in the vineyards too. There are plenty of Bordeaux châteaux with Irish origins and owners, but there are more Belgians who own Bordeaux estates than any other nation in the world. Although in 2013 the Chinese became the biggest overall overseas owners of estates, with many Chinese buyers owning multiple estates. There's another difference between the Irish and the Belgians too. Irish owned and established estates like Leeville, Barton, Chateau Clark, Chateau Keowen, they tend to lie on the left bank of the Gironde, to the south of the river, and their wines are traded through Bordeaux City, which historically sold wine to England, Ireland, Scotland and Scandinavia. Belgian estates are overwhelmingly in regions like Pomerol and Saint-Emilion on the right or the north bank of the river, and they are traded through the town of Libourne, which focused on trading with northern France, Holland and Belgium. And it's quite a trade. Depending on exactly how you cut the numbers, Belgium is the world's second or third largest market for Bordeaux. Its population of 11 million imports about as much wine as the 328 million people in the USA. Now, in the 9th century, Belgium produced wine itself, not because its wines were any good, but the vineyards on the Meuse River were conveniently close to its cities. This died out in the 15th and 16th century, and the country imported tastier wine from other places, like Bordeaux. But the real story of Belgium's influence in Bordeaux is in the 20th century. Georges Tiempon joined his family's wine business in Etikeuver in Belgium in 1904. They'd been trading wine from Bordeaux for generations. But in 1921 he actually bought an estate, Château Troplong-Mondo in Saint-Emilion. He went on to buy Château Vieux Château Setain in Pomerol a few years later. Georges was an extraordinary man, and ownership wasn't easy. Georges had to sell Troplong-Mondo in 1935 owing to the Great Depression, and then he had to maintain his relationship with Vieux Château Setain during the war. Now, the relationship between Belgium and Bordeaux was so strong that the Belgians initially moved their seat of government to the city in the early part of the war. But as France fell to the Germans, they were forced to head to London. But Georges Tiempon was undeterred. Although he was faced with no petrol, he cycled from Etikeuver in Belgium to Pomerol for the harvest. He declared it was to perdre son bédon, get rid of his paunch. His grandsons relate how he would stay with friends and farmers on the way, and he charmed his way past German soldiers by addressing them with a higher rank than they were due. After a week he would arrive in Pomerol with his pockets filled with cash for his pickers. The mayor of Pomerol came out to hail him a hero. Today Georges' descendants own chateaux across the region. Chateaux like Château Le Pin, Château Pavie-Maquin, Lif and still Vieux Château Setain. L'Être in the Côte de Castion is a new family estate. Not all Belgian investments are so old or on the right bank. Chris Cardon bought Château La Haye in Saint-Emilion in 2012, and Château des Cômes, also in Saint-Estèphe, is owned by the Baron Maurice Velge. But the Belgian love affair still seems to be with the Merlot-dominated wines of the right bank. Griet, Laviale van Malderen has owned Château des Lussac in Lussac-Saint-Emilion since 2004. It's one of the very few estates to share its name with its appellation. Château Margaux is perhaps the most famous. But not content with one estate, Griet also owns Château Vieux-Maillet in Pomerol. Perhaps Belgium's greatest stake on Bordeaux's right bank, though, is the Frère family's part ownership of Château Cheval Blanc. It's the premier Grand Cru Classé A in the 1955 classification shared with Château Ozon and Château Pavie. And what of this wine, Château Malartic-Lagravière? Alfred Alexandre Bonny left Belgium to work in New York, Detroit and Atlanta and even Argentina before returning to Europe to create his own business with his wife Michelle. But like so many Belgians, he'd been interested in wine since childhood, and again, like so many Belgians, Alfred Alexandre Michel chose to start a new life in Bordeaux at Château Malartic-Lagravière. Not on the right bank, like so many others, but this time a classified growth in Grave. Their son, Jean-Jacques, and daughter Veronique, and their daughter-in-law, Séverine, and their son-in-law, Bruno, are all part of the business in Bordeaux and in their estate, Diamandes, in Argentina. Bordeaux's Belgians remain truly Belgian, even as they become thoroughly Bordelais. At a celebratory dinner in 2012 at the chateau, the Bonnies served Ardennes ham, North Sea herrings and Belgian beer. They even set up a Belgian chip shop outside the winery. Join me again tomorrow for another story from Bordeaux with Le Grand Voyage. I look forward to seeing you then.